after the COVID issue hit. So with that being said, Case Notes 101. Who is responsible for case noting, and what are most common types of case notes? Again, like I shared before, case notes vary. They can be mentoring case notes and so on, but these are the ones that we see before COVID and after COVID that everyone touches bases on. So who is responsible for case noting? Teachers, counselors, dorm staff, clerks, managers, and directors, everyone. Anyone who has access to CIS has access to case notes, okay? What are the most common types of case notes? Before and after we've gotten into this whole COVID situation, daily attendance case notes, UA case notes, CMTs, ESPs, monthly and weekly updates for our students, student participation, at-risk, and CST case notes are the most common. Please remember the RAP format. R is knowing the reason for the case note. So this will be your title. We'll know what your reason is for these case notes. A is for action taken. What was discussed? What was being done? And what are the actions that are going to be taking place? And P, plan for follow-up. What are we following up with our students? The subject line and your reason for case notes should always match. So if your case note title says UA case note, your reason should also read the same, okay? As often as possible, a career success standard should be tied to the subject line and reason. Remember, we have 8 of them. Use the one that best is appropriate for the reason and the conversation you're having with your student. Daily attendance case notes. Primarily, teachers and counselors will be doing these, okay? Daily attendance case notes, subject and reason. Daily attendance plus the date. You'll have, perfect example, you're making an attendance contact, daily attendance contact, plus 10/23/2020. Plus the date, non-virtual absence plus the date. Again, it's simple, it's clear, and it's very concise that anyone reading it can understand. Okay, so the daily attendance case note action. Who's making contact or attempting that contact? What did your discussion or your attempt of the discussion was? What was the purpose of that conversation? What information was provided by the student and to the student? Acknowledgement of policies and student concerns or barriers. Please understand that acknowledgement of the policies is coming from part of the student. We want them to acknowledge that they know and understand what is being shared with them. We also want them to share with us what their concerns and what issues they may be coming across that we may not know. Daily attendance case note plan. Following up targeted to students' concerns. So if they shared a concern with you, what is the exact plan for that? What support is being provided to that student, and how will we be monitoring? We want to have a clear plan so that we can know what steps we'll be taking moving forward, okay? And this is a perfect example. It's a clear daily attendance case note, a clear action. So the counselor called Marcus. Here's his at his cell phone at this time, what the counselor advised, and so on. The plan, counselor will monitor the daily attendance log to ensure that student logs in. It's clear, it's concise, it's a thicker, as you can see, case note, but it has all the information that is needed for any individual that's going in to read, okay? The next case note would be the unauthorized absent case notes. Primarily, counselors, dorm staff, and instructors will be doing these. UA case notes, subject lines and reasons are very simple. UA plus the date plus the number of days on UA, if they're virtual or if they're non-virtual, okay? They can find the day of UAs on the morning report or in the student's profile, okay? Unauthorized absence case notes action. The date and consecutive and cumulative number of that the student has of UAs, was contact made or not made, types of retrieval attempts that have been completed, was a home visit conducted, has the admissions counselor been contacted or not, and if there's a plan for the student to return if you have made contact with them. The unauthorized plan case note is the plan section is very simple. The counselor will exhaust all efforts to help retain the student and prevent separation. The same thing for instructors and dorm staff and any staff members that make contact with these students. We are going to exhaust all efforts in trying to retain these students. And here you have an example for a UA case note for a student that is on day 2 and is a virtual student. It says it very clearly in the subject line. The student is UA on day 1023, today is day 2, and a consecutive of 9 in the 12-month period. So we know where their status is right at the very beginning. So we know where they stand. We have contact here with grandmother provided counselor with a number for the mother, and there's more information pertaining to how the counselor is trying to get the student back on center by 10 p.m. And again, the plan is always exhaust all efforts to retain student, but also verifying with the dorms and security that student will return tonight. So ensuring that the individuals that are on campus know what the plan is to retain the student. And at this point, I will be passing it off to Ms. Stacy Beaton for the remainder of the slides.
Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you guys for participating. Of course, we're all here to make sure that we stay on one accord. And my favorite line is teamwork make the dream work. So the next 2 sections I will be presenting on is our case management team case notes, as well as our at-risk students case notes. So when it comes to our case management team case notes, of course, our subject, like Ms. Joanne already shared, our subject and our reason is always identical. And with our CMT case notes, we want to make sure that we have in that title slide, we're acknowledging that it is a CMT, the date, and what type of CMT it is. So as you can see on the slide that's being presented, you'll of course have that it's a CMT, what date it was conducted, and whether it was an initial CMT, and those initial CMTs are usually done by those instructors, whether it's a counseling CMT, whether it's a management CMT, whether it's a CSI CMT, or whether it was an attempt to contact that student. Even with it being an attempt, you still want to reflect in the case note that it wasn't you attempted to do a CMT with those students. And I also, really quick before I go to the next slide, yes, the presentation will be sent out to everyone, and Jason, of course, will make sure that we get the link out to everyone as well. So in regards to the CMT case notes, the action, we want to always make sure that we're putting who it was that was present when that CMT was conducted, what the reason for the CMT was, what was discussed, the strategies that the staff provided to the student for support, and then of course reflecting the student concerns or barriers that may have caused them to have a CMT, and then of course the student acknowledgement of them understanding their deficiencies and what's their plan to move forward. And the P portion in our wrap format for the CMT case notes, we want to make sure that we're reflecting in that we will follow up on those student concerns, what support will be provided to that student, and then of course always making sure that in our plan we're going to monitor the student progress, because with those CMT case notes, we want to make sure that we're following up on what it is we expected the students to fulfill. And as you can see, this is an example case note of a CMT case note. So that R we talked about, you got the CMT, the date of the CMT, and then this is an example of an initial case note. So as you can see in the action, it states who it was that contacted the student, what they discussed with that student. The instructor gave some feedback to the student. The counselor, even because you got to remember with our CMTs, we have multiple staff on the calls. So you got where in that action, the counselor gave suggestions to the student, as well as allowing the student to express what their concerns were or what they were happy about. And then also reflected in the action portion that the student acknowledged that they would work with the instructor, work with the counselor, or work with the dorm staff to correct the issue that they may be experiencing. And then, of course, our plan, we'll always make sure we have a plan, which is, in this case, no example, the counselor will alert the dorm staff, and that's where that communication come in, departmental communication come in. They will contact the residential staff and remind the student to follow up. They will also touch bases. All staff, if you're conducting a CMT, is very important that you touch bases with that student after the CMT, whether the student is improving or not improving, so that we could have our follow-up case notes as well.
Hey, Miss Stacy, I hate to interrupt real quick before you move to the next one. Miss Camille brought up a good point. We have a lot of new staff, so I just wanted to go over. CMT stands for Case Management Team, and that's a team normally of a counselor, instructors, dorm staff, and other staff that's normally accompanied by a manager that supports students. So we can have positive CMTs or CMTs to address deficiencies with students, but it's an approach we use here, pulling everyone together so everyone can band together around that student and unite and help them get back on track.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jason, for that explanation. That is correct. And we also know all the staff assisting with this process. The instructors know to reach out to the management team as well as the counselors. And the goal of the CMT process is to encourage our students and let them know that it's not just the instructor trying to stay on top of them, but they also have supporting staff as well. So the next portion we're going to cover is our at-risk or our contract case notes. And these case notes are primarily done by instructors, counselors, possibly the dorm staff if it's a residential contract, managers, and of course, directors. The at-risk case notes, the subject line in our RAP format would always reflect that it's an at-risk contact and communication. So that's where those career success standards come in, where we want to make sure that depending on what the case note is, we have a career success standard attached to it. And as you guys can see, we put the career success standard behind the purpose of the case note, just so you guys can understand that when corporate is looking in the system and they're looking at our case notes, sometimes they don't necessarily open the entire subject line. So it's best to put the career success standard behind what your subject is, just to ensure that they can see that this is an at-risk case note, this is a CMT case note, based on what your case note reason is. And then the examples, as you can see, we have at-risk contact, and that career success standard that we would use for this at-risk case note would be communication. And then if you attempt to call the student or reach out to the student, you still want to make sure that it's an attempt reflected in your subject line. That way they'll know that going forward, the case note would pretty much state that the student was not able to be contacted, but it'll still show what your effort was to contact the student. And then our action portion of the at-risk case notes, we want to always make sure that in the body of that case note that we're identifying the persons making contact, whether it was one individual or a team of supporting staff. We want to make sure that we have the reason for the contact, any essential next steps for the student that would assist the student in progressing and getting off of that at-risk list. And then we want to make sure that we reflect our student challenges, any information that the student may have shared. Sometimes our students get on the at-risk list and we don't necessarily know that they have had sudden changes at home. So you want to make sure that you're reflecting, not necessarily getting too personal But just making sure that we reflect what their challenges is. And then we want to also reflect in that at-risk case note that the student acknowledged the plan or the contract that may have been provided to them. And if you can see in that last portion where it says student acknowledgement of the plan, is the student going to be placed on the contract? Then if the student is going to be placed on the contract, you also want to make sure that that student acknowledges what the contract requirements are. So if you're doing a contract case note for an at-risk student, you have two acknowledgments that have to be reflected in that case note. One would be the student acknowledging that they know what the plan is moving forward. And then that second part is the student acknowledging that, yes, I'm aware that I received the contract. This is my next steps. Really quick, I see there's a comment. We'll address the comments at the end. Leo, I see you had a comment. Give us just a moment and we'll make sure we answer that question for you. And then in regards to, of course, our at-risk case notes, our plan portion, you always got to have a plan, especially when it comes to our at-risk students. So the information that we will want to see in those case notes is showing that you will have follow-up for the student's concerns, what support is going to be provided to that student, and how will the monitoring occur. So we want to make sure that our plan reflects those three things. And then this is an example of an at-risk case note. Of course, we have our R, at-risk contact. That's a career success standard, which would be communication. And then that A portion, which is our action portion, we would see that the CSIO, which is myself, and the counselor met with the student in person and their mother on the phone. The student is at risk of being removed from the program due to excessive absences. So we're addressing what the issue is. We're sharing what level of infraction the student has received. You can see in this case note example where I'm sharing with the student what the expectation would be moving forward and to prevent, that student from getting on the at-risk list again. And then, of course, we also reflect in our action portion where the student pretty much gave their explanation of why this may have occurred. So we also got in that action portion where the student is agreeing to complete their 30 hours. So you want to make sure that whatever the student is stating or whatever has been discussed is reflected in that action. And then, of course, our plan, we talk about how the student, the CSIO, and the counselor will ensure that the student is completing their 30 hours. So that's where that follow-up portion come in and that extra support for our students. We want to make sure that that's also reflected in our case notes. And then I'll turn the mic over to Mr. Member. But before we go, I'm going to just take a look at what Mr. Leo shared. He said, what about training? Ms. Payne, your comment kind of booted my comment box up. What about training once you enter CIS? How to locate case notes, how to access. Leo, if you need any additional training outside of this presentation, I'll be more than happy to assist you. As well as I know Mr. Memmer and Ms. Joanne are very available to assist as well. So we'll just connect Leo after this so that I'll make sure you know where to find this information. And if there's anyone else who needs those next steps, please feel free to reach out to us. All yours, Jason.
Thank you, Stacy. So I'm going to start talking about ESP case notes. This is primarily for the counselors, but really important for everyone else to know about, because this is where you're going to get a majority of the information that updates everyone on where the student is progression-wise in the program. So the case note for an ESP is going to be real simple. ESP plus the dates. So you can see the example right now. While we're in distance learning, it's not always guaranteed that we're going to get a hold of them the first time we call. So you might also see ESP attempts in there being case noted, just letting everyone know that we are reaching out to the student and trying to get a hold of them to give them an update of where they stand and what we need them to work on next. So in the action, what we need to see in the body of the case note is the ESP score. So the instructors, the dorms, anyone that gives a score is going to show up in that ESP. The plan to raise any low scores, so if a student scores twos or lower on any of their career success standards, there should be a plan from the instructor as well as the counselor to help the student raise the score in that area, what their current TAR percentage is, if they've completed CTR with Ms. Judy or work-based learning, their TABE gains for reading and math, if they've already completed their high school diploma or GED, where they are in the driver's ed process, if they have a bank account and health insurance, how many minor infractions and positives they have, as well as what color phase card they have, what their long-term career goal is, so if they want to go straight to work, military, advanced training, if they've completed the ASVAB, and what barriers they're going to have that we need to work on with them while they're here once they complete the program, so they are able to, use everything that we equip them with to be successful in the future. Thank you, Brenda, for the awesome question. ESP stands for Evaluation of Student Progress. So the case note normally used by most of the counselors will be just counselor will provide the student with support, help them reach their long-term career-oriented goals, and complete all program requirements. We can see from the example here that the counselor included everyone that was representative on that panel. Just like we spoke about earlier with the CNTs, an ESP is normally conducted with the CTT instructor, a representative from the dorms, as well as an academic instructor. So in this case, the counselor met with the student. They had really high ESP scores of a 4. Their CMA TAR is represented in there. The counselor knows that he's going to need to meet with the management to get them signed up for CTR and work-based learning as their program is getting ready to come to an end. We know from reading this, the student has already met the requirements in academics to complete both TABE reading and math. They entered the program with their high school diploma. Everything we have here tells us what we need to do and what is left for that person to do before they finish. We can tell that at this point, the student is going to have issues with housing if he doesn't enter the military. So this case note can be useful to the CTS employees that start looking back through to get an idea of what they're needed to help the student with. Next slide, please. So now monthly, weekly updated case notes. This one really is for everyone on center, anyone that interacts with students. These are really important, especially for those staff right now that are doing the mentor-mentee calls. This is really where you are going to want to follow along. So for these monthly or weekly calls, the R reason or subject of the case note is going to be the time frame, the area, and the date. So we have a couple examples here. So it could be a weekly academic update, a monthly CTT update, or a weekly mentor update. Normally our academic and CTT teachers update their students with monthly updates. Right now in distance learning, it's all weekly, and most of the mentor calls are being done weekly as well. So in the body of the case note, what action was taken, we want to explain who made contact. So if it was me, I would put counseling manager contacted student, counselor contacted student, instructor contacted student, dorm staff contacted student. Whoever's making the call needs to, or text or visitation, whatever is going on needs to be listed. Purpose of the call. So counseling manager checked in with students for their weekly mentor-mentee phone call. Progress or lack of progress made during the time period. So we need to know whether the student was successful or failed at achieving their current goals. Right now, while they're on distance learning, that would be finishing 30 hours of participation. You want to include what you discussed with the student. So if you talk to them about working, if you talk to them about what challenges they're facing, about COVID, CDC, coming back to center, whatever you talked about, you want to summarize in there without including personal information about that student. You don't want to give out phone numbers. You don't want to give out health information. So you want to be careful with that. Just keep it general. That way anyone that's reading the case note knows what you spoke to them about. And then lastly, concerns or resolutions that you need to work on with the student. You're going to want to follow up on those targeted concerns, list what support is being provided, and how the monitoring will occur for the final portion of that case note. Okay, and here's an example. Weekly mentor update, the date it was done. The CSI clerk contacted the student this week to check on the progress in distance learning as well as how they are doing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Student expressed that they were struggling getting 30 hours a week because they were sick of doing math. Mentor advised that students should join the live sessions hosted daily and participate in integrated learning to break up the boredom. She advised that if they continue to struggle, she could explore if the schedule change was possible. Student agreed to try these suggestions and would let mentor know if it helped next time they spoke. Okay, so there is no, I know there has been a script that Mr. Jesse came up with and was forwarded out to staff. You're more than welcome to follow that. There's nothing saying exactly what you have to discuss with these students other than how they're doing in distance learning and keeping updated with their program information. My suggestion would be to talk to different people on Center that are doing these calls and see what they're doing. I've spoken with a lot of people on here on Center that are doing them, and everyone's doing them a little bit differently, but still getting good information from the students. Ms. Anisha up in records is keeping track of her students one way. Ms. Wanda back in building 2 has a binder with all of her kids in it. That she asks them questions, they get back to her with answers. She gives them tasks to do during the week. So there's a lot of good ideas that you can play around with. And then the P was just what they're going to do to follow up. So this mentor was going to follow up in 2 to 3 days and list what she's going to be looking for. Next one is student participation case notes. These are done primarily by instructors, counselors, dorm or rec staff, anyone, center staff, managers, mentors, and directors as well. For the subject or the reason, we're just going to put student participation or non-participation in the date. And what we need to include in these is who made contact again, what specifically was discussed, any challenges that the student is facing, the plan that you and the student developed, and then we want the student to acknowledge the plan. It's really important that the student acknowledges what they need to do differently if we want to see a change in their actions. So real quick, I see Ms. Camille said, what will be the subject line in R for residential since they call trainees weekly? It can be weekly residential update. It could still just be a regular weekly update also, Ms. Camille. It does help to be a little bit more specific. These guidelines that we gave, we wanted to keep it as streamlined as possible. So there's nothing wrong with it saying weekly update, but it can also say weekly residential as well. And just like the other case notes, we're looking for the same thing in all of these. We want to look at the targeted concerns, what support is being provided, and what monitoring is going to occur. And here's our example, student participation. So in this example, this one's being done by the recreation supervisor. This student logged into the online gaming activity for the evening and weekend program. He's happy that the student is staying engaged, asked the student what else he's looking for fun, to get them engaged in doing their 30 hours, and says that he will, in the follow-up, email the ENT director to see what qualifies for technology, or if the student qualifies for technology because the student's having problems logging in regularly. And the last type of case note we're going to go over today is CSTs, which stands for Career Success Team. These are teams that consist of the dorms and the counselors. So for the CST case note subject or reason, it should be CST and the date that the CST was actually completed. Okay, it needs to include who was involved. So if the counselor and more than one dorm staff was involved, or if the rec staff is present, or if one of the recreation or counseling managers was involved, you can include them in there as well. What student measures were discussed, any progress made, or if the student is stagnant, and then what plan that that team developed for the student. And this is a generic plan that, you know, starts off the P section for almost all of them. Dorm coordinator and career counselor will work together to ensure student success. Obviously, you're going to want to add more to that, but that's the foundation of them. And here's an example. So in this case, the counselor and the dorm coordinator met because the student is not progressing in Penn Foster towards their high school diploma. So they came up with a plan to get the student to attend tutoring after school, and are going to communicate with the teacher. The council and the dorm staff are then going to make sure they follow up weekly to ensure that the student is going to tutoring, and they're going to monitor his percentage in high school diploma to make sure that it's moving in the correct direction. Okay, so there's a couple, so that was the major types of case notes. We know that there's more types of case notes. So there's case notes specific to OA and CTS. There's case notes specific to health and wellness. These are a lot of the general ones that a lot of different departments use that we wanted to go over. If anyone needs help in making their case notes clearer or more concise, or want to make sure that they're in compliance for when our case notes are getting audited, you're more than welcome to reach out to myself, Joanne, or Stacy. Before we go, I just wanted to go over a couple major things that are important for everyone to remember for all case notes, regardless of who you are or what type of case note you're entering in. So remember to read. I cannot stress enough how before you enter a case note, you need to read at least one or two case notes that already exist, the last couple in there. You want to make sure what you're putting does not contradict the person before you. So an example Mr. Colapo gave this week is a teacher could have put that a student is not performing in class. Then the counselor the next day puts one saying that the student is doing great. They had a good ESG score, no concerns. And then the next day, a dorm staff could put, student is struggling. When I reached out to them, they don't have their login information, okay? So anyone going back reading those case notes says, well, it's obvious that the teacher's not seeing work because they can't log in. Why doesn't the counselor know that the student isn't being able to be successful because he doesn't have that? So you really need to read as well as reach out to other departments when you find out about something. One of our students, it's not enough just to put the case note in and hope everyone comes across it. You really need to communicate with the other departments, okay? So myself in the counseling department, if I find out something about one of our students that's in the dorm, I need to reach out to the dorm staff, let them know what's going on so we together can work out a plan. Mr. Jesse always says it best that we can't work in silos. Next one, please. Check your grammar. This is something that's been coming up more and more. It's really become a problem. Some of the case notes that we're reading have almost become unintelligible. You can't understand what the person was getting at or saying because it was so rushed. So please proofread what you read. I know we all are overworking and doing as much as we can to support these students, but if we can't understand what you spoke to the student about or what issues are existing, we can't work together to fix this. Next one. Minimize abbreviations. So this is a newer one that corporate mentioned on our last case note training with ODL, is they really want us to get away from using abbreviations because they are confusing and maybe different centers use different ones. You know, there's obvious instances where it might not be feasible to spell out everything. You know, I'm not sure Stacy wants to say, you know, career standards and incentive manager each time she writes a case note. So, you know, use your judgment when you're writing these case notes. Also remember that whatever you put in a case note is permanent. So after someone case notes above you, there is no way to go back and change that case note. So you really want to make sure that what you are putting down is accurate, the grammar is good, all the information is present and there. So just be cognizant of that fact because there is no changing it once it's in there. And this is the last one, 24 hours max is just a reminder that we want a case note as quickly as we can when something happens. The longer we wait, the less fresh that information is in our memory. So it's not good for the student, for the staff, if we're waiting several days to put in that we made contact with the student because, you know, we're going to leave stuff out. We're going to leave information that could be vital to the future success of that student. It could also cause other staff to be retracing your steps. So if no one case noted that, you know, Johnny is going to be homeless by Friday and two more staff is reaching out to him and he keeps repeating the same thing, then we can't be working that whole time to find a solution. So please make sure that as soon as possible, I know we all have a million and one things going on at a time, that you enter that information and get it in. So that's the information we have. Are there any questions? I know there's been a lot of comments going on in the chat box, so I don't know if Stacy saw any or if there's anything else that we need to go over that will help clear stuff up. Stacy, are you able to bring up a CIS on your laptop or no?
Yes, for everyone to see.
Yeah, Mr. Leo wants to see about getting into the case notes. So yeah, I know we have a lot of new staff, and a lot of staff that don't do case notes regularly. So it might be good real quick just to walk everyone through where they find case notes, and we can show them as well as how to review previous case notes and then how to enter them in.
Yeah, when I can remember my password. Give me a minute. I got you. Can you guys still see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So really quick, before we show you guys this portion, I do want to read Mr. Colapo's comment. And Mr. Colapo stated, the center is asking for your help. Yes, we are, guys. The center is asking for your help in making daily contact with our students and provide feedback to Mr. Memmer and Mr. Jesse. A list of hard to locate students and or students not participating in our distant learning program will be provided weekly. There is a weekly incentive to non-ENT staff with the most contacts. So please provide a list of students you've contacted in your comments to Mr. Memmer daily. As always, thank you all for your assistance and hard work. So it looks like we're getting paid. Does that count for me? I'm not under ENT, correct? So again, guys, make sure you're making contact. Keep track of who you're contacting. And then, of course, as you guys can see, once you turn in that information in, there's a possible incentive for those of us who are not ENT staff. And I'll go ahead. I don't know if Mr. Leo is still on the line. I'm going to show you guys where in CIS you will be able to enter in those case notes. So of course you would go to the menu tab once you're in the CIS system, and then our third tab from the top, sometimes it varies depending on what you have access to in CIS. You'll go under the case note tab, and then once you move your cursor over, you'll click on case notes. And when you click on case notes, of course, I'm just going to do a student name. You'll enter in that student name that you're doing that case note for. Once you've selected that student name, you always want to make sure that you're opening the case notes. So as we discussed, this is Kiana Bell. So as we discussed, it's important that you read 3 or 4 of those case notes. I always try to go back and read at least 5 case notes before I enter in one. That way you can also see, like Mr. Jason talked about, some of those errors that may contradict each other. So you can kind of see what's really happening with this student. And then if you're entering in a new case note, if you see at the bottom, you'll just type new. And this is where we're putting in all of that pertinent information that we share with you guys. So of course, you will enter in what that subject is, if it's a CMT case note, if it's an at-risk case note, if it's an ESP update. And then here you will always make sure you're selecting a note type, whether it's your bi-weekly update, your monthly update. A lot of times my case notes are usually under support services, because when they get to the point where I'm reaching out to the students, of course, it's to provide support to our staff to get our students back on the right track. And then you want to make sure you're selecting a phase. And the easiest way to make sure you're selecting the right phase for our students, usually the phase are most recent based on the case notes. So as we know, Kiana Bell is one of our students that's still in our career development period. I know she would soon be in our career transition period, but right now she would fall under our career development period. So you want to make sure you're selecting the phase for the student. And then in the body is where the wrap format comes into play. And as we've shared in this presentation, your R should always be the same as your subject. So your subject and your R, literally all I do is I copy it and paste my R so that I know there's no discrepancies when it comes to making sure that your subject and your R is the same. And again, you want to find this information by going to the menu tab, going down to case notes and clicking on case notes and just entering in the student's name whom you're writing the case note for. And really quick, I see there's a question from Miriam. I know that counselors and dorm staff conduct CSTs together, but are both supposed to case note for CSTs? Jason, I'll let you answer that question. I know we talked about that in our meeting as well. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, and I believe Jason is cutting in and out a little bit, so he may not be able to come through yet.
Okay,
there we go.
Are you back, Jason?
Yeah, what was the question?
Okay, so Miriam had a question asking in regards to the CST case notes. Is both the counselor and the dorm staff, because they do it together, are they both required to put in the case note for the CST or one person?
So in the past, we had both the counselor and the dorm staff enter the CST case note. It is a little redundant. I spoke with Sandra Collins yesterday, and moving forward, their suggestion was to have the dorm staff enter the CST case note, since the counselor is responsible for filling out the log sheet. Now, if it's a new dorm staff, I would recommend that the counselor assist while the dorm staff is getting situated and we get them trained and everything. But more than likely, moving forward, when I sit down and meet with Ms. Janelle about the new CST teams that we're working on, the counselor will be responsible for filling out the log, making sure both the counselor and the dorm staff sign it, and it's updated copies kept in that binder, and then the dorm staff will be responsible for the case note side of it.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And then there's another comment from Leo. What note type for us contacting students by phone to follow up on? So depending on if it's a weekly update, if it's if you're calling for a mentor call, Leo, of course, I would suggest a weekly update. If you're calling just to provide support, if it's a student that's at risk, or you may just be providing extra support to the ENT department, I would just select support services. And again, we don't want to necessarily focus so much. We want to focus on the note type. However, the main thing that corporate is going to be looking at is our subject and what is in the body of our case notes. That is the most intricate part. Joanne, okay, that's yes. Okay. I think we're okay. Leo has one more question. What phase for us contacting students by phone to follow up on their activity? So again, the phase would be selected solely based. I know you guys can still see my screen. Leo, if you could see, I'll show you one more time.
Well, you're pulling that up, Stacey. I just want to go over something because I know we have a lot of people on the training that aren't in the programming side of our of how Job Corps works. And so the students, while they're on center, normally go through 3 phases, right? So we have CPP, which stands for career preparation. Then the majority of their time they're in career development while they're here working in their trades and academics. And then CTP, career transition, when they're getting ready to leave the program. And then while they're working with CCS and all of that good stuff, we find them jobs or get them into advanced training and all of those things. So those are the phases you're seeing there. Okay, you also see outreach and admissions, but you won't be using those. Those are for students while we're waiting for them to come into the program. So just so you get an idea of where those fall in. And then, like Miss Stacey said, if you look at the phase in the previous case note, that's normally the best way to understand where they are now. You know, if it's a little confusing because there's different ones down there, you can always reach out to myself, Mr. Jesse, any of the counselors, Ms. Desiree or Mr. Ojo, and we'll be more than glad to go over it as well.
Okay, Jason, that looks like the last of our comments. Okay, great, Leo. And again, like we already stated, if you guys have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will be sending this PowerPoint out to everyone for your reference. And then, of course, like Jason stated earlier, he'll also make sure that the information gets sent out to all panelists so that everyone will have the link to the presentation as well as the PowerPoint presentation. And I know earlier Miss Joanne did get Miss Renita to send out all panelists almost like a case note cheat sheet. So the information that was sent out to Joanne, what I would suggest was, which I already have done, print it out, put it on your desk, save it so that way you could use it as a reference if you have any questions in the future. And we're of course getting some good jobs, great jobs. Jason, great job, Joanne. Thank you guys so much. And we're here to help out. Go ahead and let Mr. Jason close it out. And again, Jason and Joanne, thank you guys so much. Teamwork make the dream work.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you so much for Joanne and Stacey for working hard on this. Like I said, guys, please don't be afraid. We all are one team. We're here to help. If any of this needs to be gone over again, I'll be more than glad to go over it one-on-one, as I'm sure Joanne and Stacey will. And don't be afraid to ask any questions. Thank you all for the hard work, and we're all here for our students, so we appreciate you. Have a safe weekend.
Thank you, everyone.